Cases video number 7, Joseph H. Jackson in Nauvoo. Reconnaissance on Joseph Smith, the Danites, and the spiritual wife system. Right about here, Joseph Smith wants to enlist Joseph H. Jackson to help him seduce Jane Law, wife of Apostle and second counselor in the first presidency, William Law. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so, for I would have nothing to do with such things, but remark that if all parties were agreed that he and Law had better swap wives, to which he, Joseph Smith, replied that that was all Emma wanted. The conversation then turned on other subjects, and Joe boasted of his feats and schemes, and how cunningly he had carried his measures. He spoke of his spiritual wives particularly, and called them great captains in his service to carry his design, and remarked that through them he could get any stranger's money. I asked him how he would work the matter, to which he replied that he had only to tell certain of his spiritual wives that such a man had been in the Missouri War, and that he should be put out of the way, and his property, and his property and money consecrated to the use of the church. Then said he, it is darned easy for them to get into his good graces and to mix a white powder with his victuals and put him out of the way. Just a comment here, that's the same thing that William Smith, Joseph's brother, and another of their family members said that Hosea Stout did to Joseph Smith's other brother. I forget, it was Samuel, or I think it was Samuel Smith, who was in line, or probably a possible favorite for taking over the church after Joseph Smith died, but he suddenly died. So some of the Smith family say that Hosea Stout did exactly that, administered a white powder to poison him, which, so several people seem to be saying the same thing with regards to assassination of people in Nauvoo by the Danites. Hosea Stout was a Danite, one of the leading Danites, by the way. And so he's saying Joseph Smith's, some of his spiritual wives were involved with this as well, because they believed that he was God's spokesperson on earth. That was the will of the Lord. Okay. I then told him that he ought to give me the names of these women, as they might be of great service to me in carrying his secret measures. He then went on to give me the names of women who he said would go to the ends of the earth for him, but I shall not in this place disclose them. My reason for silence on this point is that the governor, to whom I disclosed all the abominations to which I refer in these pages, did not pursue the proper policy, but treated my disclosures with contempt. Had he marched to Nauvoo, as was proposed, with an army, I would have been willing to pledge my life that I could have produced proof, damning proof, of every word I have said. To disclose names when the proof was at hand would have produced its proper effect, but to mention them in these pages would only defeat the object which I have in view. Besides this, many of Joe's spiritual wives are honest in their belief of the correctness of the doctrine, and to the world they have untarnished characters. It would not therefore be generous in me, nor would the world justify it, to disclose the names of such as are misguided and deceived, but not abandoned, and thus forever blight their reputations. But more of this anon. To return to Joe's attempts on Mrs. Law, for the purpose of effecting his object, he got a revelation that Law was to be sealed up to Emma, and that Law's wife was to be his. In other words, there was to be a spiritual swap. Joe had never before suffered his passion for any woman to carry him so far as to be willing to sacrifice Emma for its gratification. But in this case, no doubt the object was more the prized because of the difficulty of procuring it. It may be proper here to observe that Law, although one of the principal men of the church, Yet he was not one of those to whom it was given to know the fullness of the kingdom. Although an enthusiastic Mormon, yet he was but little acquainted with any other than matters particularly pertaining to the church. He had frequently heard of the spiritual wife doctrine from the Gentiles, but he, not having heard such doctrine taught by Smith, set it down as a slanderous persecution against the church. When, however, this new revelation was made known to him, his eyes were opened, and at once he indignantly rejected the doctrines as not of God, but of the devil. Such was his vehemence and indignation that it became apparent to Joe that he had presumed too much on Law's faith, and that he would be idle to attempt to stuff him with the doctrine. There was no alternative, therefore, for Joe but to destroy Law's influence, and therefore a great bustle was raised and Law cut off from the holy order. This placed Law, who was particularly sensitive, in an awful dilemma, and so powerfully did the frequent lectures he received work upon his nerves that I entertained serious apprehensions that he would become crazed. One Sunday morning, Joe and I had a long talk concerning Law, in which he avowed, not for the first time, however, his determination to put Law out of the way, meaning have him killed, for he had become dangerous to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that it was the will of God that he should be removed. He, however, wished to proceed in such a manner that he would be able to get Law's wife. He then determined on calling out the police, as it was publicly called, but the Danites in private, which the city council had given him the sole command of, with power to disband or hold them on duty at his discretion. He determined to keep 40 of them on duty, 20 at a time, under pay of the city. The reason for this proceeding as given to the people was that he thought it necessary to have a city watch, but the real object, as he disclosed to me, was to murder his enemies. I should say here that the church promotes the myth that the Danite band was disbanded after certain activities of theirs were heavily publicized in Missouri in, I think, about 1838. So here we are several years later, and although it is somewhat known or noised about that many of them were involved in the police force, or maybe the Legion, or both, in Nauvoo, it's pretended that they are disbanded. Anyway, according to this, and according to Joseph Jackson here, and also John Doyle Lee and others, that's not the truth at all, that they were quite intact for a long time, and that Brigham used them. These men were, as Joe told me, sworn to the following oath. You do, each and every one of you, have the power of the Holy Ghost conferred upon you by the first presidency of this church. Swear that you will protect me and my household in every measure that I may deem lawful in the sight of God, or that I consider necessary to the prosperity of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Murder and treason not accepted, so help you God. After having given me the substance of the oath, he remarked that he could, through these means, do the thing up nicely. Not only was his design to remove William Law, but also William Marks. I think he's the stake president. The spite he had against the latter arose from the fact that he had endeavored to seduce the daughter of Marks, and she had informed her parents, who were very wrathy, and Joe dreaded their influence. For this reason, he said that those individuals, if they were not checked, would ruin the church. Now, said he, I will work in this way. I will keep 20 on watch under the command of Captain Dunham, who will select 5 to do the work. And these men will both be missing. And then I'll make a great noise about it, and call it persecutions. Now, said he, ain't this a darned good plan to get rid of traitors? But, continued he, you must keep this from Emma, for she thinks so much of Law that she won't submit to it. I replied that I would. He then said that he intended to keep up this watch until he had rid the city of his enemies. And there were some in the country whom he also intended should go by the board. He said that the church had already suffered enough from persecutors, and that he would submit no longer. Men must cease their persecutions, or he would give them a dose that would stop them. I had listened patiently thus far to the mad and hellish schemes of this wretch, when I took a bold and decided stand in opposition to him. I took the part of Law and Marx particularly, for they were the only ones in immediate danger. Joe accused me of tying his hands, and said that he could do nothing if opposed. In the meantime, a Mr. Norton had become by some means possessed of the facts, gave Law a hint of what was going on. Emma had also overheard something to arouse her suspicions, and I kept the matter in limbo by hammering at Joe in private. Soon the plot became almost visible. The people grumbled greatly at the immense expense of the 40 guards, which were kept in pay without any good cause being assigned, and suspicion was aroused throughout the city that some underhand work was in contemplation. William and Wilson Law, having heard by the vague information they had received that either one of them or Marx was the Judas whom Joe sought, armed themselves and went to Joe's house. On seeing them, Joe became desperately alarmed and gave every evidence of his apprehensions. They had a long conversation, in the course of which Joe made some abusive remark, which so exasperated Wilson Law that he drew his pistol and made Joe swallow his words in a hurry. So great was the excitement that it was with difficulty that William Law and Hiram Smith could prevent Wilson from firing. Joe, seeing his plans foiled, determined on making capital of the whole affair by raising the cry of persecution. Accordingly, he called the city council together, and in order to show the public that there was no ground for the rumors that had been afloat concerning the plot against Law, he brought up all the 40 guards up and questioned every man whether he had ever bound them by a secret oath. Every man appeared perfectly amazed, and not one had ever known of any such thing, nor did they know anything about the conspiracy against Law and Marx. This is part of Joe's game. Whenever he's accused of secret plots, he calls his men, who are instructed to appear as foolish as possible, to disprove the accusation. Hey, that sounds like what he did with the accusations of polygamy, too. Okay, so it's on to video 8. This series goes to 10 in the adventures of Joseph H. Jackson in Nauvoo with Joseph Smith Jr., the Danites, and the spiritual wives that he was basically doing a reconnaissance mission on, so we could reveal to the world the horrors of what were going on with the secret combination set up by Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon, Hiram Smith, and probably Samson Avard, the Danites, and the Council of 50.